To begin with, what we're going to do is look at the database that got created when we installed Drupal initially at the beginning of this series. So go to your Acquia Dev Desktop control panel window and click on the Manage My Database button. Doing this opens up a program called PHPMyAdmin in the browser window. This is a web-based program to allow you to manipulate a database, and it's very common for most hosting situations. So even though we're using PHPMyAdmin here on our local machine, what you learn, you'll be able to carry over as you begin to work with sites on remote servers. Now, there are a number of different layers to working with a database that we're going to gloss over or completely ignore in this series. What we're going to focus on are the practical tools that you're going to need on a day-to-day basis. Over here on the left side is a list of our databases. Each database contains a number of tables, and you can see the number here right next to the database name. When we first installed Acquia Dev Desktop, it created an Acquia Drupal database. And then when we imported a default version of Drupal into Acquia Dev Desktop, we named it learn_php_Drupal. So let's go ahead and click this in order to browse it. Over here on the left-hand side is a list of tables. Now, if you've ever worked with Microsoft Excel, for example, or a spreadsheet program of any kind, then you'll be familiar with a lot of the concepts that we're about to go over. Imagine that each one of these tables is like a page on your spreadsheet with columns and rows. Let's click on one of these tables to explore its structure. I'm going to scroll down to get to the users table, and I'm going to click that. Notice that when we did that, the Browse tab here became highlighted. And what we're looking at down here is a set of columns across the top, and then we have a set of rows that fill up those columns with records. Each one of these rows is considered an individual record and can contain information for each one of these columns. Now this area looks kind of large, and that's because if we keep scrolling over, we'll see that there's one column that has a description that's really long, but because of the way that HTML tables work, it's been crushed into this small space. I'm going to scroll back over to the left here. Now for each one of these column names, these descriptions can be really useful in order to understand what kind of information is being saved here. So for the UID here, it says primary key, unique user ID. For the name, it says unique username, and so on. The data in here includes information about two users, the user with the user ID 0 and one with the user ID 1. Now this first user was created when we initially installed Drupal. We provided this information about the user and it got saved here. You might recognize the username and the email address. Unlike Excel, each one of these columns has a data type, and we can learn more about that type by clicking on the Structure tab here. So I'm going to click on that. Now we can see each one of the columns that we were seeing across the top of our table is now a row because we're looking at information about each column. So for the UID, remember this was a unique identifier for each user. The type is an integer that's a maximum of 10 digits long. The name is a set of characters that are up to 60 characters long, and the type is called varchar. As we keep looking down, you see that the password is also varchar type. Mail, theme, signature, and signature format are all varchar. And then we go back to integer, but this time with a maximum number of digits of 11 instead of 10. If we keep looking down, there's a status column that has a type of tinyInt. Now this is a small integer, and it can be up to 4 characters long. So the number 1000 would fit within this status type, but 1 million wouldn't, because that has too many characters to fit in a tiny int or tiny integer column. We have time zone, which is another varchar, language, another varchar, picture, which is another integer, init, which is varchar, and then finally we have long blob. Now a blob can be binary, which means that it can contain information like actual images or videos. Notice that at the bottom here, we can add additional fields. These tables aren't set in stone. We can actually modify them. Now this can be a little scary. It's just one indicator of the power of this tool. We can completely change the structure of our table. We can also delete all of the data and remove tables from our database. So we have to be pretty careful about what we do here. In a little bit, we're going to create our own database table, and we'll be able to use this functionality safely.